back into this sacred space. Welcome all from across the country. Welcome all from across the world that we have here today. Welcome all bipeds. Welcome all quadrupeds, who we seem to have here as well. It's a delight to be here. So, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to do something a little different. I'd like to first set the scene for my talk, for this sermon, by taking you on a little bit of a sensory journey back to the end of the 19th century, in the 1800s. So, if you can picture a white woman, Unitarian minister, in an older house, a once used to be colorful Victorian house, standing in a sea of cornfields. She's in her favorite chair in the house. She is one of the first women of either the Unitarian or the Universalist denominations to ever be ordained. She and her sister Unitarian ministers are known as the Iowa Sisterhood. And they are spreading Unitarianism through the rural Midwest. In fact, it was so common to have a female Unitarian minister in the Midwest at this time that a child in the pews once commented on a visiting preacher and was so surprised. He said, "Mommy, look, there's a man preacher." It was that uncommon in the Midwest at this time. So the morning sun rises outside this house. It streams in through the windows, warming her as it reawakens the musty odors of home and hearth. Imagine it, the smell, picture it in the cornfields. And her spirit is elevated by the colors from the stained glass of an Art Nouveau clerestory window. She remembers imagining this as the light from an angel's eyes when she was a child in the pews of her parents' church. And this window was then given to her by her own congregation in honor of service when they built a new, more modern church home. She has it in her house. So she gathers this energy of the angel's light of the window, and she rises as sweat draws down her back, connecting her to her own body deep below the high chiffon collar and the tight corset and the multiple laminations of her heavy velvet frock. And she straightens her clothes, she walks to the door, she opens it, and she is immediately gifted with the minty oregano scent of wild bergamot growing in the yard. Can you smell it? This is a Sunday morning in the Midwest territory of a young America right before the turn of the 20th century. Now, in the urban centers of the East, Boston and the East, transformed by the Industrial Revolution, Unitarianism leadership is entirely male-led in the East. But here in the rural expanses of the American frontier, it is women ministers who are doing the arduous work of spreading the faith. Without equal pay or without equal recognition, they are guided by their Unitarian values, and they are motivated by the promise of the heavenly vision, as Mary Safford said, the heavenly vision of liberal religion. And now the minister we're imagining in this old Victorian surprises herself with a long sigh as she walks out. She breathes out the work week, and she steps through the portico, reset and enlivened, anticipating her charge to feed the spirits of her flock with worship of what their newly adopted Unitarian statement of faith named the love with which our souls commune. We're renaming love right now. We're reclaiming it now, if you've read our new article too. And it's what they claimed back the turn of the 19th century as well. Today, that same love we are describing yet again. And to worship this love It serves us well to commune with those souls of our ancestors who sowed the seeds for our faith's growth. And according to their statement of faith, they believed that reason and conscience are final authorities in matters of religious belief. They believe that to love the good and to live the good is the supreme thing in religion, counting nothing good for self that is not good for all. Sounds similar, sounds familiar. And as previously stated, they worshiped one and all that love with which our souls commune as well. These sentiments align with our current UU principles today. If we also align with the spirit of strength and of courage and of perseverance of the likes of the Iowa Sisterhood, of Reverends Mary Stafford, of Caroline Bartlett Crane, of Florence Buck, of Marion Murdoch, of Eleanor Gordon, all the Iowa Sisterhood, we too can cultivate new sacred territory today. In the 21st century, as we rise in our own homes, I don't know if there are any faded old Victorians in Laguna Beach, but anyway, as we rise in our own homes, we are them. We are those ministers, and they are us. I am this preacher whose sage words will nourish her congregation. You are the congregant and the lay leader who works against all odds to support our beloved faith as the country grows. And connecting directly into this home in this cornfield, realizing that they too had immense challenges. And they too were fallible, just like us. And they too faced each new day, just as we do. Connecting in that way facilitates an ability to travel with them in spirit. It enables us to know that if they did the work, which they did, the seemingly impossible hard work they did, we too have the capacity to do the work that must be done. Now, it may seem our struggles are very different from the Iowa Sisterhood, and many are, but certain struggles we still confront over a century later. We also must recognize that the day this particular minister left for worship, that day was only a few short years following Supreme Court rulings legalizing segregation, slavery in yet another incarnation, despite the 13th Amendment and the Emancipation Proclamation, and perpetuating America's long-established caste system. We cannot forget that. We cannot forget that the very moment this minister anticipated the first hymn of her beloved worship, it probably wasn't Joni Mitchell at that time, but something beautiful. The first hymn of her beloved, at the time, that moment this minister anticipated that, the Code of Indian Offenses forbade Indigenous Americans from practicing their religion at all. So we honor their contributions, the contributions of the Iowa Sisterhood and their strength and courage, the contributions to our faith as the pioneers that they were. But we honor them only with direct recognition of the fact that they too were colonizers of this country. Notwithstanding, the spreading of the Unitarian faith itself, even still evolving into a more just faith, as we still are, was filled at the time with a sense of excitement and of adventure. And I believe we can tap into a similar energy today. Just as the Iowa Sisterhood confronted the physical frontier with the charge to tenaciously build homesteads of Unitarian faith as they envision them, we too are setting out into an unknown expanse today. It is one with as much risk of danger, yet also just as much or more fertile spiritual soil in which to support life and in which to foster love. I truly believe that. Between 1880 and 1930, the 21 women of the Iowa Sisterhood changed the course of Unitarianism by building churches and promoting a theology of universal love and justice. If we harness that tenacity of the Iowa Sisterhood, we too can move the needle even further today. We can shepherd our faith into a future that will see our country and Unitarian Universalism grow and prosper, transformed by breeding liberation for all. Now, there's one more sobering lesson in this story I want to talk about. After the Iowa Sisterhood worked for decades to build the faith with numerous churches and numerous parishioners, those denominational leaders in the East pilfered their gains and they squandered their talents. So imagine again, let's go back to the home in the cornfield, this same minister rising on a Sunday, now it's 20 years later. The bergamot, it still blooms, yet now it fails to uplift her spirit. She's now climbing into a Model T, wearing a 1920s cloche hat and a much lighter dress, but she also has a much heavier heart because she is keenly aware that the country's ills are being blamed on cultural emasculation. And especially within the Unitarian denomination, there's a growing desire to regain a supposed lost virility to prevent any further adverse impact from feminism. They don't want any more women ministers. And the leadership of the American Unitarian Association was opposed to filling vacancies with women ministers. Now, there were still men of rank who supported the Iowa Sisterhood, mind you, like Jenkins Lloyd Jones, who worked tirelessly on their behalf. But these men were also being driven out. And consequently, the Iowa Sisterhood redirected their passion for justice through faith away from the Unitarian Church. We lost them. They continued their theologically supported work for freedom and for love, and they eventually helped to achieve significant legislative and societal reform. But only now, they did all this without the continued support and in spite of new obstacles presented by the very faith that benefited from decades from their selfless toil. For Unitarian Universalism to grow and thrive, we cannot make these same mistakes. As a faith community, we must nurture and we must promote those who are leading us today in transformative change, regardless of how it challenges tradition and those of us with privilege. And we must call out all instances of marginalization and discrimination, whether by national leadership, by ministers, or by congregants, because the work that frees us all will also put many of us ill at ease. There is an ethic of risk involved. We of privilege specifically must lose our fragility and nurture all the ministries that preserve and persevere in the face of the difficult and painful process of bending along with the arc of the moral universe. And this is not to say by any means that white people or that men or that people of privilege are not wanted or needed or cannot be leaders of our faith. They are, and they can. It is to say that the Unitarian Universalist faith needs every one of us of all genders and social locations as unequivocally equal. And that requires opening space as the modern day incarnation of the Iowa Sisterhood, as our Black, Indigenous, and people of color leaders as well take their rightful place of leadership as equals. And further, I believe anyone can be the 21st century transformer doing this unrelenting work of faith. No, we're not all ordained ministers. We're not all eloquent orators or skilled organizers and managers, shepherds of congregational growth. But what we are We are diverse. We are from assorted social locations with various lived experiences that are all valuable and various levels of privilege. However, since our collective Unitarian Universalist theology, being one of the priesthood of all believers, means that regardless of how we identify or regardless of our individual talents, we are all ministers. It's just for each of us to attend to our own inspirations, to attend to where our personal ministry lives in order to contribute. Yes, we are still a predominantly white faith, swimming in the culture we have inherited, the legacy of hundreds of years of white supremacy, with all the prejudice and inequity that that brings. We acknowledge that. The transformative change that manifested as the female ministry of the Iowa Sisterhood, challenging patriarchy, now takes the form of the vital anti-racist and other liberationist ministries challenging oppression that is both intentional and unintentional, that is both overt and covert. Unitarian Universalism in the 21st century will only succeed by supporting these myriad of anti-racist, anti-bigotry ministries and all inspired transformative ministries wherever and however they exist. As a denomination, we are the ministers with marginalized identities on the pulpit, in the pews, participating in small group spaces, occupying every space of our organization, taking the lead in dismantling white supremacy culture. But we are the white allies as well, harnessing our privilege to support that effort in various and important ways. We are the community members who fight for initiatives against all odds. We are the board governors who shape the mission guided by a combination of fiscal responsibility and liberation theology. We are the community ministers that treat our earth with no less love than we have for our children. And we are the youth who will tolerate nothing less than a truly equitable society. We are congregations and congregants from all backgrounds who believe in the liberating power of sacred worship and ritual. We are all, every one of us, in our own way, in an important and unique way, the spreaders of our faith. And Reverend Mary Stafford proclaimed that the liberal church is to be obedient to its heavenly vision. Not only must we proclaim the saving truths we hold, but we must also strive to build up these truths in our own lives and in the lives of others. It's a direct quote from Reverend Stafford. And this was a call to which the Iowa Sisterhood dedicated their lives. We can fulfill that call in the 21st century and beyond if we are obedient to the earthly vision to which we dedicate our lives. So let's go back to conclude to 1889. This minister boarded her carriage bound for her church, where she will build our denomination. Let's honor her struggle and her accomplishments as we too rise to proclaim the saving truths we hold and build up these truths in our lives and in the lives of others. If we promote and nurture the ministries that uplift us, if we promote and nurture the ministries that challenge us, as hard as it is, and the ministries that liberate us, we can lead the world into an equitable future of love with which all souls can indeed commune.